In a world where even the smallest disagreements can lead to arguments, violence, and even death, two brothers tackle the difficult subjects.
We're going to talk about the Durham Report. So for those that are unclear, although if you've been watching the news at all, you should have a fairly good idea of what it all is. This was a report that was investigating or getting a better understanding of what was going on. Let's see. Durham was officially authorized to investigate whether any federal official, employee, or any other person or entity violated the law in connection with the intelligence, counterintelligence, or law enforcement activities directed at the 2016 presidential campaigns, individuals associated with those campaigns, and individuals associated with the administration of President Donald J. Trump. That was what the Durham Report was all about, and it just was released just 2 weeks ago, I think it was. So what's been your assessment of the report?
Oh, I think it's pretty similar to um, the Mueller report. And I think finding kind of similar things were done by both sides to try to win that election. So I guess, yeah, I mean, it doesn't sound like there's any provable criminal offenses by Hillary Clinton. Uh, um, and further, it doesn't seem like anybody's going to be indicted like some of Trump's associates were, but for different reasons than we thought. Other than the collusion with the Russians for the election. But yeah, so maybe less was found, but I think it seems pretty similar to what happened. I think when I saw the Mueller report come out.
Now you're saying it was pretty similar because I feel like there's been a dramatic difference in that from the Durham report, there were 3 indictments, 2 of them concluded with juries finding the people not guilty. So there's only been 1 conviction based on the Durham report. And the numbers are fairly different with the Mueller report. So I'm curious as to why you feel like they were fairly similar.
Because there were very few indictments with the Mueller report, and they didn't have to do with collusion with Russia.
Well, there were 6 convictions that were U.S. citizens that were associated with the Trump campaign. So from that perspective, it was quite different.
But not, I mean, yeah, but the Mueller report was about, first of all, I don't think it was 6 convictions. I don't think Michael Flynn was convicted. And secondly, none of them were convicted for what they were actually looking for when they started the Mueller report. It was the Mueller report, when you and I had looked at it earlier in the week, was about collusion with Russia. And then about obstruction of justice. I think that started after the fact because there was a feeling that Trump was obstructing justice, and he likely was doing it because he felt like they shouldn't have been investigating him. But they were convicted for other things. There was no collusion with Russia. They were they were failure to file tax returns or failure to report financial transactions, things like that. So it didn't really
and lying to the FBI.
Yeah, lying to the FBI. Oh, you talking about Michael Flynn?
And Roger Stone.
Yeah,
and I think Rick Gates may have also been convicted of lying to the FBI.
Yeah, but no collusion with Russia, right?
Well, so collusion is not a crime. Collusion is only a bad thing when it's associated with a crime. So when people collusion just means working together. And so when people are saying that there's collusion, was there some sort of coordination? And it's not illegal unless there's let's say, collusion to influence an election. Even influencing an election may not be illegal. It depends how they're going about and doing it. So collusion to blackmail would be a crime. People are working together to commit some other crime. So when you say there was no collusion, not really relevant to what they were looking into.
You always, I feel like you're splitting hairs when you say that. When we look at the Mueller Special Counsel investigation was an investigation into Russian interference in the 2016 U.S. elections, links between Trump associates and Russian officials and spies. So those links, they were looking into it because, for what? Are you saying that it wasn't illegal, or they were trying to find illegal activity or some sort of illegal activity that I think people would consider collusion? You're saying, well, collusion isn't in the law, but if they're looking for, why were they looking for links between Trump associates and Russian officials and spies? Why were they doing that?
Because let's see, there was well, the reason why the Mueller investigation began was because George Papadopoulos or some people from the Australian government had said that they had a conversation with George Papadopoulos, who told them that he believed, or he was told, that the Russians had some information on the Clinton campaign that was not public. So there was looking into the connection between the Clinton, the Russians that apparently had this information, and the Trump campaign. Now there you have illegal activity.
Brian, you're skipping over the fact that you're not answering the question. The question is, why were they investigating? Like, they were investigating links between the Trump associates and Russian officials and spies because they thought that the Trump campaign was working with the Russian officials and spies to affect the 2016 election. So you can say that that's not collusion. It sounds like collusion to me. Maybe according to the letter of the law, collusion itself isn't illegal, but they were looking into that and they were trying to prove criminal activity.
Right.
So that's what they were looking for, and they didn't find any of that.
The criminal activity.
I get it. I get it that we're saying, well, it was good because then they found some other, that people weren't reporting things correctly, or maybe they obstructed justice or something. I don't know. I still think they're pretty similar. There weren't that many convictions that came from the Mueller report, and it had nothing to do with their purported reasoning for starting out in this whole investigation. And there were not that many convictions from the Durham report, and I don't know how much it had to do with what their initial one,
as opposed to 6. So I mean,
I don't think there were 6 because
okay.
Michael Flynn.
Let's say 5. It's still a 500% increase over 1.
Okay. Yeah, but 5 isn't that many, and once again, it has nothing to do with the purported reasons for this investigation that went on for all this time. And I can understand why Trump was upset about it. That all this time, everybody was accusing him of this illegal activity of collusion, let's call it, even though maybe that wasn't what Mueller himself was looking for. That's what the press was saying. That's what Nancy Pelosi was saying. That's what all the politicians were saying. And he was pretty frustrated that there was no collusion. And then when it came out that there wasn't any collusion, I think that he was in some ways vindicated. I think what is really unfortunate is that he did appear to do some pretty bad things as far as obstructing justice that he probably shouldn't have done. The similarities I would say there, it does seem like there was a lot of inappropriate behavior from the Clinton campaign in a similar way that they were trying to throw. I mean, we're talking about these bad things that the Trump campaign was doing to try to get dirt or that the Trump campaign was doing to get information about the Clintons. And I think the opposite was happening from the Clinton campaign as well. That's where I think, what's that?
The opposite was happening?
But they were doing the same thing.
Well, except the Clinton campaign was doing it legally. And if the insinuation or accusation was correct,
the Trump campaign was doing it legally, so why weren't there any convictions?
If the insinuation or accusation was correct, then the Trump campaign could have been coordinating with a foreign government's illegal activity. That's why there was the investigation that was happening into one of the reasons why investigation into the Trump campaign.
You said that the Clinton campaign was doing it, except that the Clinton campaign was doing it legally. It sounds like that the Trump campaign was doing it legally too, because they weren't convicted for those things.
Right. So there was that doesn't mean the investigation was a waste of time. And so let's bring.
You say right, but I just proved you wrong, and then you just agree with it as if I didn't prove you wrong.
How did you prove me wrong?
You said, "Hey," I said, "Well, I think they're very similar," and you said, "Except that the Clinton campaign did it legally, insinuating that the Trump campaign didn't." And then I say, "But isn't it true that the Trump campaign wasn't convicted of those things? That there were no convictions related to that?" And you said, "Right," as if I didn't just disprove what you had said.
Well, there was the investigation because the information that came from the Australian government was that Carter Page had access to information that was not public, which would mean, therefore, that it could have been received illegally. And so that's why there was an investigation. Did the Trump campaign have access to this legal information? Were they coordinating with a foreign government that was behaving in an illegal manner? That was the purpose of the investigation. And Mueller came out with these conclusions that there was that some of these people were involved with people that were in the Russian government and that were being paid by members of the Russian government. That's what Paul Manafort, Rick Gates, and I think Michael Flynn were charged with.
No, that's wrong. I mean, at least Michael, I feel like you're throwing accusations around a little bit. At least Michael Flynn, I'm certain of, that Michael Flynn was not accused of doing, Michael Flynn was talking with people, but not about influencing the campaign.
He was talking to the Russian ambassador.
Yeah.
And so he's not an official in the government. And so this was worth investigating. Now, whether there was something criminal that was happening, it's useful to investigate it to determine if something criminal actually happened or not. But this is not just some schmo on the street. This is not just some Russian in Moscow. This is the Russian ambassador. So this is something that maybe should be investigated. And it's also worth looking at the Durham Report, to get back to that one of the purposes of the Durham Report is to look at what was done badly. Where was the government inappropriate in their work and in their investigations? And one of the things that he said was that there was there was probably some bias in the fact that they were quick to open up investigations, full-blown investigations into the Trump campaign, instead of verifying some of the information that they had access to. Right?
Yeah.
And so what Durham said was that, and I'm quoting from the report, it seems like that at a minimum, confirmation bias played a significant role in the FBI's acceptance of extraordinarily serious allegations derived from uncorroborated information that had not been subjected to the typical exacting analysis employed by the FBI and other members of the intelligence community. So he felt that there was inappropriate motivation for performing the investigations, but there was nothing that fell into the category of illegal. He felt like it was a bias that played into it, not illegal, politically motivated activity.
Yeah. Yeah, I would agree with that.
Now, there are some people on the left that are looking at this and saying this was a waste of $6.5 million because it was totally unnecessary. I don't know that I necessarily agree with that. I feel like it is useful to have oversight especially when you have the FBI, which often works behind closed doors and it doesn't get a lot of publicity in how it's being done. I do feel like that's important. The one thing that I did find a little bit disappointed in all this is that there was a report that came out in 2019 from the Inspector General of the FBI, and their Durham Special Investigation found nothing beyond what the Office of the Inspector General discovered 4 years previously. So that is a little bit unfortunate.
Yeah, yeah, I would agree. But I don't know. Even I have to go back to that Michael Flynn stuff that you're saying. I just he was. They have a recording of what he said. He was talking with. I agree. Fine, you can look into it. It does seem like they jumped the gun a little bit on looking into it because they had uncorroborated evidence many times. But in his case, I don't know whether they should have looked into it or not. But once they did, nothing illegal was done. What he was convicted of was lying after the fact, but he didn't. He talked with them with that representative from the Russian government and was talking about. It was almost like he was beginning his job a little bit early,
Mm-hmm.
which was not illegal. Maybe it was inappropriate, but it was not illegal.
I mean, didn't you say that it actually broke a law when we talked about it previously?
What I said was they threatened him with violating the Logan Act,
Okay.
which is an act that was put into place about 200 years ago, and nobody has ever been convicted of it. And it's unlikely they would have been able to convict him of doing that. I said they threatened him with it, but not that he had actually broken the Logan Act or that it could hold up in court or anything else. And he was not convicted of that.
He was convicted of lying.
Yeah, but they eventually they let him off.
I thought he was pardoned by Trump.
No, that's not the story that I read was that eventually they dropped the charges against him because they had begun the investigation inappropriately.
Okay. Well, when you and I were having this conversation earlier and we were looking into it, I was trying to find the information. I think it was around Nixon era, that there was someone in one of the campaigns, it might have been in Nixon's campaign, where they were talking to, I believe it was China, and they were trying to encourage China to move slowly with their negotiations with the current administration. Because once it was the Nixon administration got into, or if Nixon won the election and Nixon administration then was able to get into office, then they would pick up on the negotiations, since then Nixon would likely be able to show their success with their negotiations. And this is why one of the reasons why the Logan Act, although it's like you say, it's never been prosecuted, why it's often cited as something that should be out there, because people can, like in the case of Michael Flynn, maybe start to work with other government officials. But it's also possible in that situation that Michael Flynn could be working with other government officials to either undermine a current administration or to encourage them not to work with their opponents in the election, which is plausible. So I think it makes sense that there was the investigation into Michael Flynn and what he was doing in talking to an ambassador. And you say, well, he's just starting his job early. Well, but he didn't have the job yet.
Brian, but he wasn't convicted of that. We can talk about how dangerous it was or what he should or shouldn't have been doing. I don't know. I'm saying he wasn't convicted of that. He was convicted of lying to the FBI.
Right.
So the investigation was, like you're saying, well, it was so much worse. Okay, maybe it was, but it was. They were investigating whether or not there was an inappropriate act or interference in the election by way of talking with Russian officials, and that's not what happened with him. In fact, Papadopoulos too, I just looked it up, was convicted. He was like served 14 days in jail and a fine of $9,500 for lying to the FBI, not because he had colluded with Russia or did something inappropriate with those Russian diplomats trying to affect the election. So whatever they were investigating, they didn't find that. I guess maybe these guys were scared or whatever, but he was convicted of lying to the FBI. If he had done something, I guess they would have convicted him. If he had done something inappropriate that, we could call colluding with Russia, or that he was interfering in the election in some way by working with those Russian representatives of the Russian government, they didn't convict him of that.
They didn't have
So
the evidence for it, right?
they didn't have the evidence because I guess he didn't do it.
Well,
Or
that's a bit of a jump right there. They
I
didn't have
know,
the
but
evidence.
you're qualifying it like you don't talk about the Durham report that way. Well, nobody was convicted because they didn't have the evidence of it. But when we talk about
Well,
the Papadopoulos, that it's because they didn't have the evidence there.
I mean, you're saying that,
You're treating these different ways. You're being biased because you'd like more to be. It sounds to me like you're being a bit biased in the way you talk about and think about these two investigations.
as are you.
That's true, Brian, but that's clear there that's an unfair characterization. If you're going to say, well, in the one case he didn't get convicted, well, they didn't have the evidence for it. In
But
the other case,
he also wasn't charged
that
with it, and
nobody did anything wrong.
this is the difference. Papadopoulos wasn't charged with a crime involving Russia. He was charged with lying to the FBI. In the Durham report, there were two people that are actually charged with the crime, and a jury found them not guilty. So it's not like maybe they didn't have the evidence, but they had enough where they thought they had enough to take him to trial. And with Papadopoulos, they didn't even take him to trial.
Wait, I'm not following your argument. I'm sorry.
Okay, so you're saying that I'm qualifying the Papadopoulos situation by saying that there wasn't enough evidence to charge him, but there was enough evidence to charge the two individuals from the Durham report. They were charged, they went to trial, and they were found not guilty.
How do you know that there wasn't enough evidence to charge him? We don't know. All I said was that was what he was convicted of. They may have brought that other evidence to court. I don't know.
As far as I know, there was no charges brought to him and related to that. The only charge that was made was the lying to the FBI.
So before, you're making it sound like the Mueller report was much more damning because all this wrongdoing was found, and you knew that it had nothing to do with interference in the election by way of Russian officials. Like, that to me is the point. That's the point I was trying to make, is that, listen, they're kind of similar because the whole point of the investigation was finding inappropriate activity between Trump campaign officials and Russian officials regarding the 2016 election, and they didn't find anything, or hardly anything. You're like, well, there's six convictions, but not even having to do with what they were investigating. Well, that's not that big of a deal to me.
They were lying about what was being investigated. So I mean, you can say it wasn't like they were, being investigated for murder, and then they were convicted of tax evasion. We're not talking about Al Capone.
Actually, Brian, I think the point you're making is actually what happened, because Michael Flynn did nothing inappropriate did nothing related to affecting the campaign. Let's say he began his job too early, I guess. They threatened him with the Logan Act, and that's what he was nervous about. He wasn't nervous about, he had done something, he had tried to affect the election, he tried to collude with Russian officials or anything like that. He was like, well, maybe I shouldn't have talked with them. But it wasn't like he had colluded with Russian officials to win the election. So it was unrelated to what the whole investigation was about. He was lying about something else.
Well, I mean, first of all, we're kind of gone a little off topic here, and we're negotiating the Mueller report instead of the Durham report.
Well, I think we have to, because my whole point was I thought there was a lot of similarities, and you're saying no, there wasn't. So I'm trying to prove the similarities.
Well, if you look at the Durham report, I mean, if you look at the content of the Durham report, okay, William Barr, who was the Attorney General when Durham was tasked with this job, William Barr, in defense of it, said, when you're dealing with people who make discretionary decisions that were within the authority, it's very hard to prove corrupt intent. And this is really what he's talking about as far as the FBI goes. If there was a provable crime, it would have been brought. John Durham felt he could not prove criminal intent in these cases. So it comes back to what was the motivation and the intent of the people that were doing the investigations. And Durham found that it was most likely not much more than confirmation bias. It wasn't some political purpose to try and destroy a campaign. And that is very important. The other thing that's interesting about it is that there was the only successful criminal charges were against an FBI lawyer, Kevin Kleinsmith, who pleaded guilty to altering an email used to get a surveillance warrant on Trump's campaign aide Carter Page, and he wound up getting 12 months of probation. So, in that case, the one guilty verdict was in altering an email in order to get the warrant that he was looking for. So a little bit different than interacting with a foreign nation and one that we don't have a great relationship with. And whatever you want to say about Michael Flynn, George Papadopoulos, any of the others, they were interacting with a foreign nation that we don't have a great relationship with. Some would even say an adversarial relationship.
Sure, Brian, but they waited a couple of weeks and it would have been perfectly fine, right? Like you're acting as if it's this terrible thing that they're going to be in, that they would possibly interact with a foreign government. They would do anything with Russia.
Well, yeah,
that's their job. They are going to be interacting with Russia.
It's not their job, not yet. It might not even be their job. It could have been.
You're acting as if it's this terrible thing. That is what they're going to be doing. It's not a terrible thing to interact with them. Maybe he did start early. I don't know how bad that is. I really don't.
It's not. They might even. At that point, it wasn't even sure if they were going to win.
Oh, I think when Michael Flynn was interacting, they were sure he was going to win. I mean, I think the bad things that you could say, even some of those, like the meeting that Trump Jr. and those others took with, where was it, in the Trump Hotel where they
Trump Tower.
Somebody told them that they had dirt on the Clinton campaign.
Mm-hmm.
Doesn't seem that bad to me. Should it? If Hillary Clinton got word that the Russians had this bad information that they could get to the Clinton campaign, I think she would have had somebody meet with them. I don't think that's the worst thing in the world. If Michael Flynn is talking with a Russian diplomat that in a couple of weeks he's going to have a relationship with, I honestly don't know how bad that is. It doesn't sound that bad. You kind of were coloring it as if it was this horrible thing to talk with a foreign government that we have an adversarial relationship with.
Yeah.
We have a copy of the transcript. They were talking about normal stuff that I don't know how early you should start that. And by that time, when Michael Flynn was talking with them, yes, it was clear that they were going to, I believe at that point, they just hadn't made the transition, but they'd already won the election.
Well, I mean, when you're talking about having a meeting and someone and a foreign nation having dirt, I mean, are we talking about a foreign nation, having access to information that everybody could have access to, or having access to information that they illegally obtained? And this is really what it all comes down to when you're investigating the relationship with Russia, because George Papadopoulos said that they had information. The implication was that George Papadopoulos was saying they had information that they obtained illegally, that a foreign nation obtained illegally on their opponent in the election. And so when someone is aware of a crime, the first thing you would expect someone to do is to let the proper authorities, the law enforcement authorities, know that a crime has been committed. And that, of course, did not happen.
You're saying that George, I don't know. I'd have to see exactly what George Papadopoulos said, that he should have reported that I don't even, I don't know. There's a lot of vagueness in there. So you're saying that at some point, George Papadopoulos knew that whoever he was getting information from had obtained it illegally, and so he should have told the police or something?
Well, okay, so the information came from the Australian government that they were some of their people were having conversations with George Papadopoulos, and George Papadopoulos is saying that the Russian government has has information on Hillary Clinton's campaign. Now, what kind of information would a foreign government have on an American presidential campaign that was obtained legally that no one else would have access to? And so
wait a second. I that seems a huge assumption, that you have to assume that if the Russian government has information on Hillary Clinton and it's not public knowledge that it would be illegal? No, I totally
It's
disagree.
it's a safe assumption. I mean,
No,
no,
it's
it's not.
not.
It's not a slam dunk. It's not a guarantee, but it is a pretty good assumption,
Well,
especially
they have
because
spies. They get information all the time, and it could be obtained legally. We gain
spies.
information. Yeah, we are spying on Russia all the time. We're
Yeah, but
spying on
it's not
everybody.
legal.
Spying is illegal.
Yeah, spying is illegal.
So the whole CIA, we should be convicting them, or what do you mean it's illegal? I don't understand.
If
007, James Bond is illegal? What are you talking about?
yes, yes, you didn't know this?
No, I didn't know this. No,
Yeah,
we no, we're I mean, spy is it, it depends on what activity they're doing. They're a lot of times gathering information, I would think legally.
I mean, you are right. If they're just having a conversation with someone and that conversation is not giving away state secrets, then yes. But
You're
if
saying that the whole CIA right now we should put them all in jail, or if Russia had their way, they would convict all of them?
if they can catch them committing a crime, yeah, that's what
Okay,
they
but
would
they're
want
not
to do.
always committing crimes,
Which
right?
sometimes they're just walking down the street. Sometimes they're just going to get a cup of coffee.
So anything, but any information that the CIA gathers, it's gathered illegally, is what you're saying.
No, that's not what I'm
Okay.
saying.
Well, it sounded like that's what you were saying because you said if George Papadopoulos found out that Russia had information that's not public knowledge, it must have been gained illegally.
Well, I mean, remember that we're talking about a bunch of people that are campaigning, and so we're not talking about Hillary Clinton's the name of her dog. We're not talking about the flowers that she's planted in her garden. This is actually
Okay.
relevant information to the campaign, and so either they have information, they have people that are getting information that no one else, that no other politicians, that no other press, that no one else is getting about the Hillary Clinton campaign legally, or they've gotten it illegally. And as it turns out, soon afterwards, the WikiLeaks released the emails from DNC, and then a few months later, they started releasing the emails from the Hillary Clinton campaign, and those were not obtained legally.
Okay. Let's go back to the point you made earlier. You said any information that they have that's not public knowledge must be gained illegally. Why would you say that? I think they can gain it legally. They can just do investigations. They can look into financial records that might be publicly available. I mean, this stuff is found out all the time. It's not illegal. It's not like anytime anybody gets convicted of something, the information was gained illegally. I think that's a misstatement to say he should have just assumed if they had information that was not public knowledge, it would be information that necessarily had to be gained illegally.
I think you should have been very concerned about it because Russia does have an adversarial relationship with the U.S. even at that point, and it was something that was plausible, was a reasonable assumption that Russia could have illegal information on the campaign, and it was
Okay.
never brought up. It was never told to the FBI, because if it were, the FBI wouldn't be investigating George Papadopoulos. They would have been working with George Papadopoulos.
Okay, well, if he did something illegal, I guess they would have convicted him of it, but they didn't, right? So I
So
don't
they
know.
investigated him.
Yeah, they investigated him,
Yeah.
but they didn't find that he'd done anything illegal. And based on what we're talking about, they didn't convict him of anything. So either they couldn't find the evidence, or he hadn't done anything illegal. But it seems like you're grasping a little bit at straws when you say, well, he had to have done something illegal if he had this information that he
No,
was.
I was talking about Russia, not George Papadopoulos.
You said that Russia must have gotten this information illegally, and
Hmm.
George Papadopoulos shouldn't have had it, or he should have assumed that they would have gained it illegally.
Yeah,
So I'm saying, well, if George Papadopoulos did something illegal, I guess they would have convicted him of it,
right.
or
He
they
didn't.
couldn't find the evidence. So he didn't do something illegal, I guess.
Right.
Okay. So what are we talking about?
I kind of forgot
I
where all
just
this
don't
came
see
from.
I don't see there's a lot there. I think I just what we have found was we're talking about it. You're kind of poo-pooing what they found in the Durham report because there were very few convictions. Well, if we look at George Papadopoulos as an example, there was no evidence or not enough evidence to convict him of doing something inappropriate or illegal. I guess doing something illegal with the Russian government or colluding or whatever you want to call it. There wasn't enough evidence for them to convict him, or as far as I can see, anybody of doing something illegal with the Russian government. They were convicted uh,
Lying about it.
of lying about something.
Lying about their relationships with the Russians that they were interacting with.
Okay, yeah, but I mean, Michael Flynn, for example, there's the perfect example. Michael Flynn, he lied about his relationship with or what he had done with Russia, and we have transcripts of what he actually said, and it was not colluding with the Russian government to affect the 2016 election.
Yeah, you're right.
So that's why I think there's a lot of similarities between the two reports. There's just not a lot there. I'm with you that if they had to investigate it, maybe that was for the best. I don't know. But I just don't feel like that the actual results that there was too much there.
One of the unfortunate parts about the Durham report is that the one solution that he offered was that he said the FBI should have some sort of devil's advocate, so that when someone wants to go and perform one of these investigations, you have someone saying, "Well, what if?" Trying to propose some alternative theories or ideas, and that was really the only solution that he offered. So, for all these years that he looked into it, he didn't really have a whole lot of concrete solutions. And people pointed out that in the Inspector General report that came out a few years earlier, that one actually had more concrete solutions, and specifically dealing with the FISA court, which is really what a lot of people are concerned about with the some of the Mueller investigations, was that the FBI, there wasn't a whole lot of oversight. And this is one that I know you've been concerned about as well. And I know we don't have a whole lot of time left, so just going really quickly, that is something that is more important. You and I do agree that there should be a bit of oversight. Your idea is more, if I don't want to speak for you, but that less government activity, and my idea is more transparency, typically. Yeah.
Yeah, I just think they're doing too much. I think we've given them too much power. Your idea, if I remember correctly, was to change the requirements for the FISA report or get more oversight or something like that. I mean, to get more transparency into the FISA courts, I think is a little bit difficult because it's almost by definition has to be somewhat secret
Mm-hmm.
because they're surveilling people, U.S. citizens, and many times U.S. citizens, and they have to do it without the same following the same requirements that would be necessary, to meet the rule of law or whatever, in other situations. But they get an exception, and so yeah, I just think they have too much power. They're looking into too many things, and we should take some of their power away because I mean, after all this, yeah, very few convictions. Maybe some stuff was found about lying to the FBI, but not what they were looking for. And so I just don't see too much there.
Yeah, and one of the other things that's been really interesting, and you brought this up in our conversation just a couple of days ago, is that depending on which side of the political spectrum you get your news, this is either blockbuster, big news moment, or this is, as they like to say, a whole lot of nothing burger. So
Yeah.
it kind of confirms what you already believe.
Yeah, I would say, yeah, I totally agree. I think that's a great point. If you read Fox News, the Mueller report was nothing. If you listen to CNN or any of the others, then it's just a shame that we couldn't convict him. It's just because he was a sitting president. And then with the Durham report, it's the same thing. All the Republican leaning institutions are saying how terrible it is, all these terrible things that were found out. And Hillary Clinton um, came up with this plan to try to smear the Trump campaign with colluding with Russia. That was part of her plan to get elected. And then you talk to the Democrats, and there's just nothing there. Yeah, it's really difficult to get from the press anything that seems clear or transparent.
Yeah. Well, we spent a lot of time on a lot of information beyond the Durham report, but I feel like we hit some of the major points that needed to be talked about. So I would still call that conversation a success. All right, so we'll have to have a conversation about what our next topic's going to be.
Okay, thanks, Brian.
Bye, Colin.
We hope you learned something in this episode of Brother versus Brother, a podcast about difficult conversations. We also hope that you enjoyed it enough to subscribe to the podcast. You can help us by spreading the word. Share this episode on your favorite social media so that others will have an opportunity to experience it as well. You can also support us by donating through Patreon. This information and more can be found on our website, broconvo.com, and on our various social media accounts. Thank you.